He had also had an earlier stint in Reuters as a political and economic news correspondent and was briefly a producer in AP television. He started his career in the New Straits Times many years ago, I think, and spent a year in Business Times before joining Reuters. This is not part of his official profile, but he's also one of the few journalists to have been held overnight in lockup under the Sedition Act. So, without further ado, Mr. Jahabar Sadiq.
Good morning, everyone. I just want to say that the last time I met Sharizan, I was going into lockup and I was coming out of lockup. So it's never, I don't know if it's a good meeting or a bad meeting when Sharizan's around. But today I'm going to just give a brief overview of what journalists go through and what has gone through in the last 30 over years. 30 years ago, my then colleague, I was still a schoolboy when he was arrested, charged, convicted and fined for 7,000 ringgit for revealing some secrets. His name is Sabri Sharif. 30 years from then to now, we've had many forums like this. We've had a lot of signature campaigns and everything. And the law remains and has been enhanced. When Sabri was convicted and fined, there was no mandatory minimum 1 year jail. The year he was charged, convicted and fined, the government, the then government, the Mahathir government, amended the law and imposed a minimum 1 year jail. But you know, there have been a few people who have been jailed. Ezam Mohamad Noor, who's now with the government, he's been jailed. More often than not, I think we go through this paper, you see there are 7 cases. I think Ezam is the only one who's been, Ezam and the late P. Pato have been jailed. What does that tell you? You know, as Sharizan said, there's a country where the government that is either mute or it just goes on and does what it does, or they don't turn up. I'm still waiting for the MACC chap here. Okay, but what I'm trying to say is, as journalists, we go through a lot to get information, and more often than not, in the last 5-6 years, 2 things have happened. 2 very interesting things have happened. Because of the OSA, civil servants, as much as possible, don't give you anything for 2 reasons. One, you are not part of the sanctioned, licensed media in Malaysia. You are part of what they call opposition, pro-opposition media, which the Malaysian Insider, Malaysia Kini and all are lumped together. So if you say you're a Malaysian Insider, you get nothing. And we realized this a few weeks ago when we started this hyper-local thing, and we covered City Hall, and they said, oh, you're a Malaysian Insider? 0. Don't even try to enter. That's one thing. The second thing is, civil servants these days have the mindset, I think in the last 30-40 years, that everything is a state secret. Okay? And the best example of that is a month ago when Tabung Haji had this expose on Tabung Haji buying land in TRX. And the police, the IGP said they would investigate the revelation under the OSA, which is stupid because Tabung Haji is a depositor fund. Okay, it's funds from depositors, not from the government of the day. So anything they do, any board decisions they do will be covered under the Companies Act, not under OSA. But when you have the top police official saying things like that, then you realize it's not just the OSA that's the issue. I was talking to Nadia Swaran just now. It's actually the entire mindset of the civil service, that everything they handle is under the OSA, right? The other thing that's happened in the last 5-6 years is because of the prevalence of handphones and all kinds of micro devices, you get a lot more information. Instead of getting nothing these days, we get an overload of information, okay? And we have journalists who've got 3-4 years experience. We've got editors with maybe a few more years experience, sifting through all these documents and trying to make sense of it. With no experience, no legal experience, no business reporting experience, no accounting experience to actually go through all this data, right? And so more often than not, they will just wait for the likes of Rafizis, Tian Chuas and all that to tell us, hey, hang on, this is what's going on, right? And sometimes we'll get exclusive documents from them. But you got to realize, okay, in a country where people give you something, there must be a reason why they're giving it to you, right? So of course we also get stuff from the barisan side of life about Pakatan people. So you got to weigh, you know. In my case, apparently I'm seen to be partial to the opposition, so obviously not a lot of it comes out, apparently. But I think it's because, and I say this openly now, I don't want a Pakatan Rakyat government in the federal government, because there won't be much news or scandals, right? I said much. Okay. But I think the point is, last week we had this one website, the benchmark. I'm sure you all know the benchmark. It revealed the Tabung Haji purchase. Last week, the benchmark had a pay limitation of itself, called the benchmark 1. The original benchmark is benchmark 0. Giving details of what the Sarawak report did not give, that actually the board had agreed to give this money to Petro Saudi and everything was above board. So you actually had a website that looked a lot like the original website. And if you did not know the difference, you have just written the story and said, hang on a minute, this is new, right? So my point is, as journalists, we don't even need to worry about the OSA. Now we have so much of information, and we'll get confused because we won't see that little one difference in the URL. And we would just go ahead and report it, right? Just like, for example, these days, Raja Petra gets quoted in NST. Now, you know, if Raja Petra gets quoted in NST, you can't trust him anymore, right? Simple as that. But when Raja Petra wasn't quoted in NST, you trusted him, right? It's a perception, really. I know, I'll say this openly, I don't trust him at all. But because in a land where there's nothing, no information, zero, you would believe a half-truth, right? And this has been happening in our country for a long time. OSA has helped the civil service to hide everything. So whatever comes out, and no matter how implausible it sounds, we will actually report it. And we will try and check. And I think if you read through this report, I'm actually one of the interviews in this report. I recognize my quotes in a confession of transparency, that we have to go through so many ways to verify information in a classified document so that we don't say it came from a classified document. And sometimes it takes weeks. We need to know people who know, okay? The experience in the last 5-6 years since I got back to Malaysia is most people don't know what's going on. Most civil servants really don't know what's going on. Information is limited to very few people, okay? And the best example is 1MDB. If you ask the 1.4 million strong civil service, or even ask the top guys in the treasury, in finance ministry, they don't know what's going on, okay? And more often than not, because these documents are not part of the archives in the departments. It's more off balance sheet than off balance sheet is, right? And so how do you get these documents? In the case of Sarawak report, before they had that cache of documents, they actually approached us and says, we can get this cache of information. And they said, but it'll cost some money. And I said, I've never paid for information in my life, and I won't start now. There are lines you can't cross in journalism, right? And I've been approached many times in Malaysia for all kinds of stuff like this. Do we pay? We don't pay. It's not an excuse for not exposing things, but there is a price to be paid for a bit of honesty in reporting. We don't pay. And I was actually quite surprised that Claire Brown managed to get it, because I heard the sum was astronomical. I wish I had that kind of money. So I can run the Malaysian Insider without any corporate money, but you don't. So we didn't pay, someone else paid for it, and it's a treasure trove of so many things. But of course, I think we're only interested in 10% of it, right? And it's 1MDB is a private company. I mean, it's a government company, but it's a private company. Nothing there is under OSA, right? So these days, I think, in my case, I got to say, OSA does not play much a role in what we do, because all the scandals are economic in nature. All the scandals involve government companies, or government-related companies, or government funds. And the ministers themselves, I think, and maybe if you want to report this, you can, don't realize that, all these things are not classified as secrets. Our job is just to go through all this data, get the information, get some accounting skills, and figure out where and what has happened. Unlike my colleagues in the past, where defense procurements and everything was actually part of government, these days it's all done in such obscure and opaque ways. We don't know who owns what anymore. A good example is the government private jet, the one that was bought. The deal goes to another company as a maintenance deal, or as a leaseback deal, or as a service. It's not an outright purchase. But the payment is high. So that's a scandal, right? Not so much as an acquisition of any material. So that's not covered under the OSA, right? So these are the kind of things that most journalists go through now. Our fear of persecution under the OSA is almost zero. I'll say this: the only fear we have is sedition. Sedition imprisons our minds. You don't need the Sedition Act to put you in jail. Sedition Act just imprisons your mind so you don't say out anything anymore, right? Because what's sedition? One man's meat is another man's poison. So it's those kind of laws that affect us as journalists more than, say, the OSA today. And which is why I think, after so many years of campaigning against the OSA, it's not so much, and I agree with Stephen here, it's not so much the OSA, it's so much more strengthening other laws which give us access to information. We live in a country where information and data is a lot more precious than 42 billion. It's as simple as that. Okay, it's phenomenal how much of money actually goes missing in this country. I can't say it because it's an OSA, right? But the point is, I think this government has realized they need to keep all this information a lock and key. So that's what they do. They put fear in everybody's minds, in the civil service, in all the agencies. And when we ask, we get nothing. We get nothing because they need to protect themselves. They think that we will sell them down the river. More often than not, we won't. Because I've met journalists who had to blab out stuff because their editors told them, please tell the police what has happened. We don't practice that policy. But these days, as I said, journalists are getting younger. They fear. They have their whole life ahead of them. And the days of finding someone like Nadeswaran, who started in journalism in the middle 70s until now, is over. Okay? It's over. Journalists these days are 5-6 years, and then they go on to have a successful career as a PR person, and then eventually one day become an educationist and advise the government. So you have those kind of people. But the ones who stay on, and I've had this conversation with Nadeswaran and all these years, and he says, what has happened? Nothing much. But we still soldier on, the few of us. And I don't think Nades has been in jail yet. I have just been in lockup. The fact that people like Sabri Sharif or my colleagues and I going into lockup or going to jail is just for me an expression of unnecessary heroes. We are unnecessary heroes. We were just doing our job, and we'll still do our job. Okay, it's this government that has to realize that you have to be honest with the rakyat. And this goes to all governments, both the Barisan government and the Pakatan government. That I think, I'm involved in a case now with the former Menteri Besar of Selangor on a commentary we made about his Bank Islam settlement. Is it sub judice to talk about this now? No, right? You don't know these days. Everything is sub judice. Only in a trial of jury I know. But the point is, so even at that time when we had a Pakatan government, we still have one with a different Menteri Besar, we went through hoops to try to get stuff, and we didn't get it, right? So I think, for me, it's very simple. Anyone who becomes government automatically I won't trust them. For the simple reason they have secrets to keep, right? And they can have all the laws, freedom of information and all that. I will still have to jump to hoops to get information, right? And to me, it boils down to mindset. I have something to protect, So for me, laws are great. They tell me that you have institutionalized things to protect yourself, but if we can get a whole bunch of people, politicians and civil servants who serve the people, and where journalists play a role to say, look, okay, this is this, let me explain to you this acquisition and everything. Be as transparent as possible. Transparency is missing in Malaysia because people have a lot of things to hide, right? And that's why you have a forum called Nothing to Hide, because you have a lot to hide. Thank you very much.